Hola, I am your host, Tristan Andrew, about to give you, for the first time, a survey of holiday works by Spanish composers, including a famous elegiac guitar concerto by the blind composer Joaquín Rodrigo. Let's get into it, amigos. The Iberian Peninsula, home of both Spain and Portugal, has received different musical influences from around the Mediterranean Sea and across Europe. Roman rule brought with it the music and ideas of ancient Greece. Early Christians introduced differing versions of church music, and the Visigoths, the first to sack Rome, Moors, who were Muslim, and even Jews in the medieval period, had a hand in shaping the area's music. The result of more than 2,000 years of internal and external influences produced numerous unique musical traditions. Although symphonic music was never too important in Spain, chamber, solo instrumental, mainly guitar and piano, vocal music, and opera, both traditional opera and the Spanish version of the German Singspiel, was written by local composers. Musical creativity mainly moved into areas of popular music until the nationalist revival of the late Romantic era. Notable examples of Spanish-influenced works include Maurice Ravel's Bolero, Nikolai Rimsky-Korsakov's Capriccio Espagnol, Ernest Guiraud's suites to Georges Bizet's Carmen, Claude Debussy's Iberia from Images for Orchestra, and Emmanuel Chabrier's España, to name just a few. Here I want to talk about the music of two Spanish composers themselves. A critical aspect of Spanish music is, of course, the Spanish guitar. The development of the earliest guitar is lost to the history of medieval Spain. But we know that the 4-string al-oud was brought to Iberia by the Muslim Moors in the 8th century. Another precursor was probably the European lute. At least 2 instruments, called guitars, were in use in Spain by 1200. The guitarra latina, meaning Latin guitar, and the so-called guitarra morisca, meaning Moorish guitar. The earliest important composers of guitar music are from the Age of Elegance and include the Spanish Fernando Sor and the Italian Mauro Giuliani, both of whom wrote in a style strongly influenced by Viennese classicism. The composer of Symphonie Fantastique and Damnation of Faust, Hector Berlioz, studied the guitar as a teenager. Franz Schubert owned at least 2 and wrote for the instrument. And Ludwig van Beethoven after hearing Giuliani play, commented that the instrument was a miniature orchestra in itself. Niccolo Paganini, whom Sergei Rachmaninoff made a famous Dark Rhapsody on, was also a guitar virtuoso and composer. He once wrote, "I love the guitar for its harmony. It is my constant companion in all my travels." As for famous guitar music, there are guitar concertos by Antonio Vivaldi, although he wrote them originally for mandolin or lute. Other examples of guitar concertos were composed by Mauro Giuliani, Hector Villa-Lobos, Mario Castelnuovo Tedesco, Manuel Ponce, Leo Brouwer, Lennox Berkeley, and Malcolm Arnold. Since I am always on the hunt for holiday music, I have selected one particular guitar concerto for my inclusion in Halloween. Concierto de Aranjuez by the blind Joaquín Rodrigo. Born in 1901 and blind at 3 years of age due to diphtheria, Rodrigo studied music first in Valencia and then with Paul Dukas. In Paris. While in Paris, Rodrigo befriended many composers of the time, including his fellow Spaniard, Manuel de Falla. In 1933, just as Adolf Hitler became dictator in Germany, Rodrigo married the Turkish pianist Victoria Kamhi. They remained inseparable companions until her death in 1997. Rodrigo started composing in 1923 and won a national prize in 1925 for his 5 children's pieces for orchestra. His real breakthrough as a composer was with the Concierto de Aranjuez, which was acclaimed from its first performance. Rodrigo was quickly recognized as one of Spain's great composers, and the awards and commissions started to roll in. In 1947, the Manuel de Falla Chair was created for him at the University of Madrid, where he taught for many years. He was much in demand as a pianist and lecturer, traveling to Europe, Central America, the United States, Israel, and Japan. He received commissions from, among others, guitarist Andres Segovia, flautist James Galway, harpist Nicanor Zabaleta, and cellist Julian Lloyd Webber. In 1953, he received the Cross of Alfonso X, the Wise, from the Spanish government. And in 1991, at 90 years of age, Rodrigo was raised to the nobility of King Juan Carlos I with the title Marquess of the Gardens of Aranjuez. He was ultimately given Spain's highest international honor, the Prince of Asturias Prize for the Arts, in 1996. The French government made him a Chevalier de la Légion d'honneur, Knight of the Legion of Honor, in 1960, and promoted him to Commandeur des Arts et des Lettres, Commander of the Arts and Letters, in 1998. By the end of his life, he had received 6 honorary doctorates from universities worldwide. He died in 1999. He and his wife, Victoria, are both buried at the cemetery of Aranjuez. The Concierto de Aranjuez, with its emotionally charged, slow movement, is one of art music's most iconic compositions. It was composed in Paris, where Rodrigo and Victoria were living in near poverty since fleeing the turmoil of the Spanish Civil War, prior to the rise of dictators like Francisco Franco. Concertos for guitar and orchestra are rare, and prior to its first performance, Rodrigo suffered sleepless nights, worried that the quiet-sounding guitar wouldn't be heard above the forces of the orchestra. However, Rodrigo's subtle orchestration and novel writing for the instrument proved his fears groundless. Despite not playing the instrument himself, the Concierto de Aranjuez reveals Rodrigo's great affinity for guitar, as well as orchestra, along with his reverence for the long-standing traditions of Spanish art music. Although it was composed in 1939, the year World War II began, it was not performed until he returned to Madrid from France. It premiered to great success in 1940 in Barcelona. The work is widely regarded as an attempt to transport the listener to another place and time through the evocation of the sounds of nature, birds, crickets, and so on. As already noted, it is highly charged emotionally, and we can think of it as a requiem to pre-Franco Spain. In those terms, we can give it a place in our Halloween playlist. Aside from its overt references to Spanish folk music and straightforward lyrical disposition, the Concierto de Aranjuez is notable for the way in which Rodrigo managed to wed the relatively small voice of the solo guitar to that of the full orchestra. His writing is extremely idiomatic, both for guitar and orchestra. And one leaves a hearing of the work with the impression that writing for the two together is quite natural. The guitar never seems overmatched or out of its element. Rodrigo's orchestration is simple, clear, and yet interesting. At times he creates a dialogue between soloist and ensemble, and at others he manages to turn them together into one giant guitar. An extremely imaginative and successful effect. Rodrigo also creates distinctive colors by combining the guitar with other solo instruments, like the cor anglais and bassoon. The first movement's 40-measure introduction begins with the solo guitar strumming in rasgueado, a 3-measure theme, 6/8. The theme is made of tonic, supertonic, and dominant chords and features a flamenco-like hemiola rhythm. This would be familiar to listeners of Leonard Bernstein's and Stephen Sondheim's America in West Side Story. As it repeats several times, the tonic chord's uppermost note gets higher, starting with the third, then using the fifth, the tonic, and the fifth again. But the optimism fades in the best known second movement in B minor. It is marked by its slow pace and quiet melody, introduced by the cor anglais, with a soft accompaniment by the guitar and strings. A feeling of quiet regret permeates, with ornamentation added gradually to the melody in the beginning. An off-tonic trill in the guitar creates the first seeds of tension in the piece. They grow and take hold, but relax back to the melody periodically. Eventually, a climactic build-up starts. This breaks back into the main melody, molto appassionata, voiced by the strings, with accompaniment from the woodwinds. The piece finally resolves to a calm arpeggio from the guitar, though it is the strings in the background rather than the guitar's final note that resolve the piece. Rodrigo and Victoria stayed silent for many years about the origin of the work, and popular belief held that this movement was inspired by the bombing of Guernica in 1937, famously depicted in Pablo Picasso's painting. In her autobiography, Victoria eventually declared that it was both an evocation of the happy days of their honeymoon and a response to Rodrigo's devastation at the miscarriage of her first pregnancy. But the story contradicts information in a letter Rodrigo wrote in 1943, 3 years after the debut, in which he said that the writing of the concerto was sparked by a dinner in Santander in September 1938. A pleasant evening shared by Rodrigo, guitarist Regino Sainz de la Maza, and the Marquess de Bolaque. During this occasion, it was suggested Rodrigo should compose a guitar concerto, to which he agreed. I remember also, I don't know why, but everything relating to the Concierto de Aranjuez remains in my memory. That one morning, 2 months afterwards, I found myself in my little study in the Rue Saint-Jacques, in the heart of the Latin Quarter in Paris, thinking vaguely about the concert. I heard the complete theme of the Adagio singing inside my head, all at once, without any hesitation, and almost identical to that which you will hear. And then immediately, with hardly any transition, came the theme of the third movement, exactly the same as appears in the work. The last movement is in mixed meter, alternating between 2/4 and 3/4. At the beginning of the movement, 4 measure phrases containing 9 beats in total are formed from the 3/4 measure followed by the 2/4 measures. As the movement progresses, the meter becomes more irregular. It begins with the guitar starting the theme in the wrong key of B major, but the orchestra restates it in the home key of D major with brass fanfares. For Rodrigo, this movement recalls a courtly dance in which the combination of double and triple time maintains a taut tempo right to the closing bar. He describes the Concierto itself as capturing the fragrance of magnolias, the singing of birds, and the gushing of fountains in the gardens of Aranjuez. While associating this wonderful work with Halloween may be a bit of a stretch, its melancholy elements are a welcome addition to what tends to be a sometimes overwhelmingly ominous playlist. Our next piece goes from a nostalgic Halloween to a hopeful Christmas. In this sampling of Spanish art music, we present a study in contrasts. For example, Rodrigo went from a relatively brief period of poverty and obscurity to international recognition and acclaim. His meteoric success was springboarded by our Halloween work, which is perhaps the most recognized guitar work for art music ever written. But the Halloween connection is admittedly a bit tenuous. Our next work was explicitly written for Christmas by a Spaniard who was better known as a performer than as a composer. Like Rodrigo, Pablo Casals was deeply affected by the Spanish Civil War, but Casals had already gained an international reputation as a cellist. With the outbreak of the Spanish Civil War in 1936 and the defeat of the Spanish Republican government, he vowed not to return to Spain until democracy was restored. His Christmas piece celebrates Spanish culture but looks forward to a better future in combination with nostalgia for an unobtainable past. Pablo Casals is another name for Pau Casals. Born in 1876 and dying in 1973, and one of the greatest and most inspiring musicians of his time, he was Catalan by birth and reluctantly adopted the Spanish version of his Christian name to establish his playing career. He continued to compose under the Catalan version. The music of Casals is strongly rooted in Catalan folklore. Between his career as a cellist and teacher, almost single-handedly establishing the cello as a major concert instrument, and a long period working on a single large-scale piece, El Pesebre, or The Manger, and Oratorio, he wrote very few works, mostly songs and works in Catalan folk dance style. During Casals' long years of exile from Spain, following the victory of Francisco Franco's forces and the subjugation of Catalonia that followed, his Song of the Birds achieved the status of a symbol of the Catalan nation. It has a large number of arrangements for various combinations of instruments. The Song of the Birds is a traditional Catalan Christmas lullaby. It tells of nature's joy at learning of the birth of Jesus Christ in a stable in Bethlehem. The song was made famous outside Catalonia by Casals' instrumental version on the cello. The Song of the Birds became a signature piece for Casals, who often performed it in recognition of the plight of refugees around the world. An exile himself, Casals said that he hoped that these sounds may be like a gentle echo of the nostalgia we all feel for Catalonia. These sentiments must make us all work together with the hope for a tomorrow of peace when Catalonia will again be Catalonia. In recognition of this, Casals was offered the United Nations Peace Medal in 1971, 2 months before his 95th birthday. On that occasion, Casals made a speech in addition to performing the Song of the Birds. As Casals said, birds sing when they are in the sky. They sing, peace, peace, peace. And it is a melody that Johann Sebastian Bach and Ludwig van Beethoven and all the greats would have admired and loved. What you're about to hear is a cello and orchestra arrangement from the 1970s. Both pieces demonstrate the depth and passion that is so much a part of Spanish culture. It sometimes seems that Spain is not well represented in art music, that the culture is perhaps exploited by composers from other countries to suggest a people and lifestyles more primitive, harder to understand, and exciting as a result of being somehow exotic. Both the Song of the Birds and Concierto de Aranjuez serve to dismiss such ideas. Both pieces are enormously accessible for listeners, no matter what their background, even as they celebrate the heart of Spanish life and its wonderful diversity. I hope you agree, amigos. If you are aware of Spanish art music that can be appreciated through my holiday lenses, feel free to let me know. I hope you find these two Spanish works as enjoyable as I do, and I hope you learned something from this brief survey on Rodrigo for Halloween and Casals for Christmas. Please comment, subscribe, and keep listening. Adios.